I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain. We bag enough. I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain. We bag enough. Poppin' tan model BC couldn't brag 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 enough. I guess I didn't swag enough. Stupid fruity pebble chain.
And welcome once again to another episode of the Horizon Roundtable. I am Bob McDonald, and joining me is my co-host Jim Sarro.
Hey, Bob. I'm excited for today's guest. It doesn't get any better than this. If you're a fan of mid-major basketball, we're going to hear from the new leader of the Horizon League. And for all of our audience members who are listening, I think you're going to be really interested to see what plans she has for basketball moving forward.
All right. And Jim, you can find on Twitter at Jim Sarro. You can find us on the web at horizonroundtable.com. You can find links to all of our social sites and sites where podcasts are available at horizonroundtable.com/subscribe. You can also sign up for email alerts on that particular page, so go ahead and do so. Become a patron, patreon.com/horizonroundtable. Features start on June 3rd, and you can actually read what we put up last year for $1 a month. So go to patreon.com/Horizon Roundtable. And of course, you can donate to us at horizonroundtable.com/donate. And Jim, to your point, Jill Bodensteiner is the new commissioner. And I guess you don't really need to do any more introductions besides that, what you just said, Jim.
No, this is what the Horizon Roundtable brings. We bring the leadership, the people you want to hear from. And I think I definitely am excited to hear from Jill.
Absolutely. All right. So with no ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into that interview right now. All right. We are now joined by the new commissioner of the Horizon League, Jill Bodensteiner. Jill, thank you very much for joining us. I believe we're the first people to talk to you as an interview. So welcome to the Horizon League.
Oh, thank you so much, Bob. I'm really, really happy to be here, and you're catching me on day 2 in the office.
Oh, there you go. All right. So first and foremost, you came to the league after spending a number of years as the athletic director at St. Joseph's. What is your best memory of your time in that role?
Oh, there were so many, and one of them actually was Sunday night. I emceed our annual Student Athlete Awards. It was a really emotional night after 8 years of being hopefully really close with our student athletes and having a great experience with them. It was great for me to give them a send-off, and they gave me a great send-off. So it was a really emotional night. I finished there at Hagan Arena around 9 p.m. and then got in my car the next morning at 8 to drive to Indianapolis. So that felt like a real closure after a great 8 years. And but more tangible, I think. Our field hockey team is nationally prominent, and we beat number 1 and previously undefeated North Carolina 2 falls ago to make it to the national championship game. And that was the first national championship that any St. Joe's team had ever played for. So that was a really cool experience. Men's basketball and women's basketball beat Villanova in the same year for the first time in a long time, a few years back. That was fun. I said I was going to celebrate like I'd been there before. And then there are pictures of me going a little bit nuts. So those were good memories. But all in all, I'll remember the people more than any specific moments.
Jill, with coming from the Atlantic 10 by your most recent stop, that's definitely known across the country. Whether I know you guys have success in other sports, but it's known as a basketball league, and obviously the Horizon League has held themselves out to be a basketball league. A little bit of a difference for you. The Atlantic 10 is a 14-member league with 11 private schools, and then the Horizon League is going to be a 12-member league with 10 public schools. Are the issues, or is it like going to require a different way of thinking for you as a leader of a league that's it's still urban, it's still basketball, but maybe the membership is comprised differently? I mean, how do you lead through that? And what worked for you at St. Joe's that might carry over here to the Horizon League?
Yeah, great question, Jim. Very astute on the difference. I mean, I came from 20 years at Notre Dame and then 8 years at a Jesuit institution, private Jesuit institution in St. Joe's. So I did tell the board of directors of the Horizon League when I interviewed. Like there's a little learning curve, and I think part of it's just the real logistic of how information flows and FOIA requests and transparency and just getting used to that, having been worked at private institutions my whole life. There are certainly some nuances, like the way, as we talk about collective bargaining, the way that hits is different, as we learned in the Northwestern case from that NLRB, talking about the difference between private and publics. And so, I'm a labor and employment lawyer by trade, by the way, so I geek out on nuances like that. And so, there are funding issues, state appropriations, and other funding issues that I need to get to know. And I've warned the chancellors and the presidents that I'll have a little bit of a learning curve to understand how budgeting works at state institutions, different than private. But I think all in all, my leadership style certainly remains the same. My goals remain the same, which is to, provide a fantastic experience for our student athletes at the championships and beyond, and to compete our butts off in a way that I think is still possible in this day and age in this national landscape. And it may look a little different between public and privates on some issues, but generally the goals and the style remain the same.
You mentioned the
And
budgeting component. I'm sorry, Jim, you can go ahead and follow up on that.
yeah, I just had one second question that kind of goes right along the line. So, like one of the things, Jill, I'd heard when you were offered the position with the Horizon League, everybody said incredibly smart, which obviously, you just were talking about things that I have no idea what was going on there. So I appreciate that. And then also said you very hands-on dynamic leadership. Can you kind of you talk about working with the presidents and chancellors of the universities, like a little bit of what your plan might be to get started? Is it more of a boots on the ground approach, or what plans do you have on that front?
It's interesting. This is probably going to be a longer answer than you anticipated, Jim, but earlier in my career as a practicing lawyer, I was a little bit more transactional in my approach. And I think over the years, I've become more relational. I think different jobs call for different skill sets. And I think that, when I moved from the general counsel's office at Notre Dame into athletics at Notre Dame, one of the real reasons I did that was to work on the relational side of me and to have more people who I could develop and mentor. When you're a lawyer, you're sort of an individual contributor called to problem solve. But so my gosh, how long was that? My 9, 10 years in Notre Dame athletics and my 8 years at St. Joe's have really honed my ability, I think, and my desire to have the relational part of me come to the top. So I'm excited to get to know people, right? I go from 450 athletes and 100 plus employees to a staff of 12. And so I'm going to have to get my fix somewhere. And I see that, the proverbial campus tour will be coming this summer and just really getting to know. And it used to be presidents and chancellors and athletic directors and coaches were the obvious, but also our SWAs, our faculty athletic reps, and in this day and age, our general counsels or attorneys general, if you will, for some of the institutions, and our government relations staff, because that's become a really important part of college athletics. So I really look forward to doing that tour and getting to know what are the challenges and opportunities at each institution that I could maybe, either help them with or at least acknowledge in the way I lead.
Speaking of kind of the challenges, one of the things that we have witnessed kind of in the last few years is that budgetary element that you mentioned, touched upon earlier. Um, One of the recent examples of that is Purdue Fort Wayne. They shut down their baseball program, and for a conference like the Horizon League, that actually significantly affected the conference because the conference itself went down from 6 teams to 5 teams, which is below obviously the NCAA benchmark for automatic bids. Now, of course, with Northern Illinois coming back, that's only a temporary situation. But looking at an example like that, and we've seen other examples of that over the past few years. Um, how do you believe that this is what that challenge? Do you have an idea of kind of the approach of the contingencies that you might take that you might tackle in that event?
Yeah, it's, first of all, it's a really perfect storm right now when it comes to the finances of college athletics. And I think, people like to focus in on the finances of departments of athletics. It really goes much beyond that into higher education as a whole. A perfect storm of post-pandemic, a perfect storm of, the demographic cliff, which we've been waiting for in 2026. And here we are. I'm a perfect example of a woman with no children, no college-bound children. And so, every institution in America, whether it's negotiating with the federal government or facing enrollment challenges or state appropriation challenges, is rethinking. And it's really, I think, an awakening in higher ed and an opportunity to rethink how we're delivering our education. Um, and so athletics then, meanwhile, with the pressures and the changes and the opportunities to reevaluate higher education, meanwhile, athletics is in a state unlike anything we've ever seen before. And so it's sort of a perfect storm. And again, what I really hope to do is understand where our institution's challenges lie. That helps inform me on how to make those contingency plans at the league level. I'm so fortunate to be taking over from a phenomenal, one of the best Division I conference commissioners in the country, and one of the best people in all of college sports. And so, that I'm not walking into a place that doesn't have plans and contingencies and a great staff on the ground. So, a weekend, I'm not sure I could outline all, for all the sports we sponsor, where we are on AQs and what the plans would be. But Bob, you're absolutely right to call that out. And it's a dynamic time. We've seen multiple rounds of conference realignment. So every commissioner has to go in eyes wide open, whether it's by sport or by institution, and have contingency plans ready. So I'm excited to work with our members and my staff to get to do that.
As a follow-up, I wanted to ask about obviously Julie Orlesh is now at the Pacers organization. She is still in town. How important is it to have somebody that was in this position in such close proximity to be able to, get some kind of advice for, any contingencies that happen?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm just incredibly excited to be able to spend some social time with Julie. I consider her a friend and have known her for years, and maybe go to a Fever game and have a night out on a patio with she and her husband. Just wonderful people. And with technology these days, I'd probably be picking her brain even if she had left for Argentina. So. But having her here in the city, she's such a leader in the city of Indianapolis, which I think is the best, has quickly become one of the best sports cities in America. And so, everybody knows Julie, and in some ways it's a little intimidating to be compared to Julie, but in more ways, it's really exciting to have those doors open because she did such a great job of creating those relationships in her multiple years at the Horizon League. So yeah, I look forward to connecting with Julie as a friend and for advice, and we'll do so readily while understanding that she's got a great big job to do, and I don't want to be a pest.
Jill, when you're coming from the Atlantic 10 and St. Joseph's, where the expectation is basketball excellence and multi-bid leagues. In the past, there's at least my understanding that Horizon League programs on the men's basketball side maybe had to do some schedule calibrating to make sure that what we're putting out there was competitive. Do you kind of have any other thoughts? I know we're catching you on day number 2 in the office, so this might be a little bit too soon, but do you have other thoughts on, like, are there certain things that you've seen that work in terms of, like, hey, if you schedule enough home games or if you spend a minimum spend that might be implemented on the roster side for the Horizon League? Do you have some thoughts around, like, what are the things that we really need to be doing to make sure that we're elevating our basketball performance as a league?
Yeah, first of all, I think Julie and Kelly Ford and others on the staff have done a great job of really sharpening some of those tools that are in the toolbox, Jim, and the conference metrics are on the rise when it comes to basketball. And we see how our teams compete in the NCAA championship and during the regular season, against teams who have larger budgets and so on and so forth. I have always been a big fan, and this is probably goes back to my roots. My dad's family were farmers. My mom's dad was a Dubuque Packing Company employee, and You put your head down, you work really hard, and you try and punch above your weight class, right? And so I think we did that really effectively at St. Joe's. That scrappy kind of mentality is what we're going to have here in the Horizon League and have always had. But I think Kelly and I are already digging in on scheduling. We're already talking about tournament expansion and what that could look like and what we need to maybe recalibrate based on what we learn from what that model looks like. If we need to recalibrate our thinking based on the expansion model, which I feel fairly certain is going to happen. But to me, the number one issue, and that currently feels out of our control, is transfers. And you can talk about collective bargaining, getting the money genie back in the bottle, over the cap spending. But the number one issue that impacts our basketball programs is the transfer portal. And if there was a way, right now the NCAA is bound by a consent decree based on a case brought by 10 attorneys general. And so we're a little bit stuck. Congressional help would be a blessing. But if our student athletes, that's the way to control the market is if the pool is smaller because people either have used their transfer without having to sit, or have to think twice, waiting maybe for their one move, their one free move. If we could bring the rules back in. So I'm really focused on talking to as many people and learning everything I can about what the options are. Everyone at the NCAA, everyone throughout college athletics knows that we've created chaos by having, essentially a mode of free agency with no rules. And so to me, that's the number one impact is the ability to retain. We get the talent. Our coaches do a phenomenal job on the men's and women's side of recruiting really talented student athletes. So it's a matter of seeing what we can do to help them retain.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you is about not just your, aside from your work at St. Joe's, you're also part of the Knight Commission. You've also been a part of multiple NCAA committees. What elements of those roles do you feel best prepared you for what you're going to be doing as commissioner?
I've never been in a conference office, so I've been really clear during the interview process with my staff, with the athletic directors I'm talking to, that I have a lot to learn, and I'm a willing learner, and I'm excited to learn from other commissioners and many, many more. What I think I'm good at is forming those relationships, maybe helping us reach consensus on some tough issues. But what I think I'm pretty good at with my law background, my opportunity on all those NCAA committees and with the Knight Commission is to survey the national landscape, prioritize what we need to prioritize. I mean, I have kind of a heat map of about 26 issues right now, and I'd kept it at St. Joe's, but with all the fires coming up as an athletic director, it's hard to really sit on your thinking chair and strategize. And so I'm really looking forward to having the space to do that and to be able to say, look, we can't, some of these issues may be frustrating, but we can't control them, or some of the issues don't really impact us as much. So when I look at that heat map, what are the areas that should be most important to our member institutions and what can I do about them is really, I think, sort of probably in many ways why the presidents and chancellors of the league hired me is because I think my background that you mentioned, Bob, helps me with that. I also think that I had the opportunity to work with one of the smartest people in college athletics when I was at Notre Dame Athletics working with Jack Swarbrick, who's also here in Indianapolis and who I plan to bribe him in whatever it takes to pick his brain and continue to learn from him. I learned so much as a new person in athletics, working the way his mind is always 3 steps ahead. So I'm really excited to kind of to pull on that experience as well and see how I can help our member institutions. But my goal would be in large part, let me worry about those 26 issues with your input, and you guys, get to focus on campus and revenue generation and all those sort of things.
Yeah, Jill, you were talking about with the possibility of tournament expansion in the near future. And then obviously conference realignment has been a major issue. But one of the things, conference realignment, I mean, that's always been going on. It's just big now. I mean, I think of, if you look in this league, Detroit used to play against Marquette in conference play 40 years ago. So realignment's always been there. But do you, coming from a bigger league, is bigger better, or is one, is smaller better in a one bid league? Or if with tournament expansion, does that open up the opportunity to expand to get more teams, quality teams, and do unbalanced scheduling to improve metrics? Like, where do you kind of think the landscape moves for the membership size based on some of the issues that might be on your heat map?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Jim. And I'm not sure there's a number I have in mind. I think you mentioned so many of the factors that you'd have to consider. And I know, at many leagues, it's driven in large part by media rights. We have the luxury of not sort of, we're not the kind of league that has a media. We have a great media relationship with ESPN, and I'm sure you guys are tracking that, but we're not bound to make decisions by media rights deal. We can take in a lot of factors, including media rights. And so you have to look at non-conference scheduling, conference scheduling, what kind of opportunities, all the things you mentioned, Jim, I think really do go into it. Travel, we don't have leagues that have an interest in driving across country to play their regular season. It's just not who we are. I think our geographic footprint makes as much sense as anyone in the country. And I'm really like that. And so I think geography matters. So you got to look at bids, scheduling, financial and media rights, travel, and all those things when you think about the makeup of your conference. And so, I was a part of the Atlantic 10 when we added Loyola Chicago, and it was a fellow Jesuit institution with a university president who had hired me at St. Joe's and then left us for Loyola Chicago. So talk about, showing up to the same meeting with the same guy, only he's wearing a different color. That was a great ad for the A10, and for many reasons. We were creeping into the Midwest, and it gave another great Midwest school, great basketball history, great profile, great brand, several Jesuit institutions in the league. So, another key factor is sort of, when you're talking to the presidents, the more like-minded they are on issues, the easier it is to get consensus. And so I know for some leagues, whether it's, AAU research institutions, or, for ours, I know a lot of our schools are a fantastic solution for first generation students. And so that's a factor that a lot of us have in common. And so there's so many things that go into it. And I guess I feel sort of lucky that we don't have a single issue that would have to guide us as some leagues do. We have a myriad of issues that we can look at in making those decisions.
And Bob, can I just follow up with another quick question?
Sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned on the TV side and having ESPN, with the streaming platform. And so, I mean, that's been, for the fans who are hardcore fans, it creates access to everything. For a lot of fans of this level of basketball, they're fans of the home games, but not necessarily the road games, or they're fans of their team, but not necessarily the league. Is there any thought around how to get more linear exposure for the league so that, people are telling our story as a league nationwide? We get a handful of the, typically Friday night games on, the ESPN network. But I don't know what the streaming numbers actually look like. But I was just curious, like, how important is still linear, because you see some of the other leagues that we aspire to be or compete with, they still have a little bit, I think, a little stronger linear package that they're offering. So I was just curious what your thoughts are on old school TV still. Is that still a thing in today's day and age?
Yeah, I do care about linear and old school TV, but also as streaming becomes more and more, I mean, the way that particularly young people consume media has changed dramatically over the years. And so I think the power of streaming obviously is only going to get greater and greater. So it's a little bit generational, but look, I think the more exposure, the better. On whatever that means, whether it's our own content we're producing, the content produced by the institutions and our media partners, our opponents, right? Having the opportunity to play opponents who have their own coverage and their own fan base, and who might help their fans say, "Wow, that Wright State team." I mean, it was a little bit surreal because St. Joe's hosted the first and second rounds of March Madness in Philadelphia at the Xfinity Mobile, and so I got to sit courtside for Wright State versus Virginia, and the number of my staff and my Philadelphia connections who are like, "Holy cow, Wright State can play." They are well coached. They are disciplined. And they were a class act. I mean, as they moved throughout the building and frankly throughout the city. So that was a really neat experience, sort of for my people to get to see my new people in action and to say, wow, that's some really, really good basketball. So, those opportunities, certainly in the postseason are priceless, but it was a really cool one for me to see. So yeah, linear still matters, but all exposure is good exposure, and I think we're changing at a rapid pace.
Kind of to touch on that as a follow-up to that part, I know that the Horizon, you mentioned the content that the Horizon League produces, and we're obviously very familiar with what they put together in the past. I know the Life in the League series from that's produced by the league is something that's kind of a point of pride, and I know that during the basketball season, I know that Greg Rakestraw hosts the Live on the Horizon show. Is there? I know it's only your second day, but looking at those offerings, do you see some opportunities to potentially expand beyond those particular offerings, especially when you look at you know we exist because there are certain markets that do not cater to their schools at all. And are you taking that into account as well?
I think it's funny that you ask these great questions, Bob, because our number one sort of deep dive internally is on communications, and I started those discussions yesterday. We have an open position, as you may know, and so that rises to the top of my priority when I look internally in staffing. And first of all, I know you've asked a ton of great questions. I'm super impressed with your knowledge of the landscape and the Horizon League.
I hope
But
so. I've been doing this for like a decade.
But first and foremost, I think I'm cognizant of the fact that staff is going through a lot of change. They haven't had new leadership in a while. Julie was with the league
Yeah.
for a really long time in one capacity or another. So I'm really sort of focused on getting to know them and easing what is a human nature anxiety whenever you have a new leader in. So um, spent some time with Chris and with Beth and with Kelly yesterday talking about communications and prioritizing that as an area. And I think that requires us, communications is a broad, it's your traditional, recaps and stats. It's broadcasting. It's more public relations when, bigger news happens and proactive news. It's content, content, content. And so, I think this one really requires us to have conversations with people like you all off the record to say, what are you seeing? What have you seen? What would you like more of? With our member institutions communication staff. So I can't go in here myopically thinking, what does the Horizon League need to do without understanding the whole sort of palette that's out there when it comes to communications. Obviously, and we have a ton of constituents, right? We have our fans, we have hopefully people who buy tickets to our championships. We've got our corporate sponsors, we've got recruits. And so really putting up the way I operate is giant whiteboards and putting up who are we trying to communicate to? How are they best receiving information? What kind of content and other information do they want or need? And then finally, we can't do everything. What moves the needle for the league and the member institutions the most? And so that's what it'll look like. And the stakeholders are many, like I said, including yourselves. So I'm excited to dig into the communications area and see what we're doing well and where we can get better.
Jill, you're a little bit of a visionary in terms of your personal social media footprint is relatively minimal. So you will avoid one of the great Horizon League traditions every late February and March. Bob, you'll attest to this, of our fan base being fractured about the conference tournament format and how it exists. There's a large amount of people still want
Oh, you mean the great debate?
the great debate. Yes. Thank you for putting a
Ugh.
moniker on that.
I wish I didn't have to.
I know, but you will, if you're searching around on social media, what you'll see every time the regular season ends is there's a lot of people who are like, hey, I wish this thing was still all on campus. I know we have a new agreement with the new venue in Noblesville, which I think is going to be a perfect venue in terms of what the Horizon League needs. It's a basketball centric building. Everything's modern. There's some amenity spaces. Like it's a good venue from what I can tell. You mentioned earlier, though, you and Kelly were talking about maybe tournament format. I just wanted to put kind of get your feel for like you've come from a league that does a complete neutral site and has done it, whether it's been in Brooklyn at the Nets Arena or, previously at the Boardwalk Hall or at PPG Paintery. Like, if you were building this thing out, do you have some thoughts on what you think a tournament format should look like?
I have some thoughts, but I'm still uninformed and I'm still a bit of a rookie. So, again, that's a topic I want to really listen and learn. I'm actually heading out to Noblesville this evening to get my eyeballs on. And so, I think the previous I was able to attend this year's championship at the State Fairgrounds in Indianapolis, and so I'm there are so many factors. Again, I know I keep saying this to every question, but you have to think of attendance, you've got to think of revenue and sponsors, and first and foremost, our values say we're guided by the student athlete experience, and so is that on campus? Is that getting to travel to a place that feels a little bit different? And yeah, I love big arenas. I love that atmosphere. But what is not great is playing in a giant arena that doesn't have a great crowd. And so, there's just so many things and debates that I can see why Bob has named it the Great Debate. But again, I want to listen, learn, certainly get a chance to see how Noblesville delivers. And I'm incredibly optimistic and excited about that whole area. So maybe have more thoughts in the coming months, but right now I'm just sort of an open book and really really pretty pumped about what we've got for next year.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, you didn't ask, but I'm going to take my offer. I'm calling my shot, Jill.
Great.
I personally like the Noblesville idea. I just like the idea of expanding to include more teams. As a fan who goes to these things, right now it's like, okay, I gotta wait till Thursday and then I can figure out if I'm going to go on Monday. And the number of people who are going to do that from a fan perspective, the problem is that the fan perspective doesn't necessarily move the needle financially all the way. And that's why I recognize the variability. But I'm just calling my shot while I have you as a
Great.
captive audience. So you got to,
That's great.
you know,
Thank you for sharing.
yeah. Bob, what do you have next?
Um, Actually, I'm just going to take one of your questions because I know you wrote a bunch of them. Outside of basketball, are there any just are there any sports the league that doesn't sponsor right now that in the future potentially could be additive to the conference for exposure?
I mean, the one that's just growing like crazy right now is flag football, and I love flag football, and so I don't know if you guys have heard much about Notre Dame's intramurals, but until a few years ago, intramurals at Notre Dame, every dorm, and every student lives in a dorm for 3 years, and so uh, every dorm had a football team, and for women it was flag, and for men it was full pads and helmets until a few years ago. And these football games were incredibly intense, and I was the 4-year starting quarterback for our flag football team, and so I am extraordinarily passionate about the sport. I loved it. I loved playing it. My coaches were Tony Rice and Rocket Ishmael, were our flag football coaches. So I have pretty funny
Nice name
sports.
drops.
Yeah, how about it, right? I have pretty funny Sports Illustrated covers where, Tony was like, I'm still the better quarterback. And Rocket was like, you'll never be able to throw it as far, those kind of things. So I had a phenomenal experience playing intramural flag football at Notre Dame, and it's honestly one of my best social experiences of my undergraduate. That was many, many moons ago, but um, and so many conferences are talking about adding flag, and so it's not just about gender equity compliance, it's about participation opportunities for women and meeting them where their interest lies. And it's a sport that's just come a really long way in a short time. The NFL is really getting into it. It's an Olympic sport, and so we're when you look at our league and you think about how aligned we are with NFL teams and original NFL teams, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the conversation on flag and getting NFL. I know at St. Joe's we were able to join the ECAC, which got a grant from the New York Jets, which was a really nice opportunity. So we started a club team just this past year, and the interest was great. So that's something that's on my radar for multiple reasons. Um, And beyond that, with all my charts here on my desk, I've yet to really stare at where we have the most number of affiliates and what would make, this is where it goes into the member. Are you thinking of adding, and what would be, what are your biggest clubs? What's happening in your local area? And just sort of, do we have alignment on flag football or any other sport that people are thinking of? And then seeing what neighboring conferences and others are doing will be important as well.
Joe, you talk about flag football growing. I mean, you can see on ESPN2 sometimes, or ESPNU, they have like youth flag football stuff. Like there'll be these teams out of Texas, and it's super impressive to watch. I've only seen a little bit of it, but it's not necessarily like esports where everybody thought esports was going to be the big thing, and it really didn't take off to that level at the college. Esports is still
Yeah.
big, professional game players, but not necessarily at the college level, it doesn't seem. But I do see the pathway for flag football. It's actually covered by national, sports media already, and aired. My last question for you, when you think about the money, these public institutions and the two private members of our current, membership, the money we have is the money we have, right? Like they make what they make, and they have to stretch it as far as possible. The money that Horizon League makes is what it makes, and they have to stretch it as far as possible. Do you see, do you have ideas, especially along the lines of like right now, the players are so important, we can pay the players. And if we ever get to the point where we're above the cap paying the players, I think that'd be an amazing thing. But, Horizon League level, it doesn't think we're going to be there anytime soon, which is totally fine, just given how high the caps are. But when you talk about paying the players, where do you see opportunity maybe to reduce expenses? Is it going back to travel partners? Is it less expensive officials, not using a consortium? Is there something else out there where we can say, hey, of the money we make, now we've figured out how every member institution can have an extra $100,000 through cost reduction of what we're already doing. And $100,000 at this level is a pretty good player typically. Is there anything that you see that's like an easy change that maybe to bring up to people?
Probably not ready to do that yet. I think Julie and Kelly and the rest of the league had been really thoughtful about the possibility of some supplemental or basketball excellence. So I've got a lot to learn, but that's exactly the lines that we need to continue to think, Jim, is how can we help our institutions in a incredibly competitive environment and one where, the almighty dollar is really playing a gigantic role in one's ability to succeed. So yeah, I don't see this as solely an institutional issue. I think the conference, both as a thought partner and as finding our own creative ways to generate revenue, is really important.
Perfect.
All right. All right. So I had one last question. So Jill, understand you're originally from Valparaiso.
Yes.
Um, and as somebody who's married to somebody from Valparaiso and actually lived there for about a year and a half myself, I have to ask a very important question. Popcorn Festival or County Fair? And mind you, there is no wrong answer here.
That's really easy for me because I grew up, and I don't know if this is actually video or just audio, but I grew up downtown, so our fans can know I'm using air quotes. But I grew up in downtown Valparaiso, and the fairgrounds when I was growing up were just north of downtown, but the Popcorn Festival was centered in downtown, and so to get out on our porch and watch the parade and be able to just ride my bike around. And I'm a popcorn fest all the way. I do love the county fair. I still go back for concerts, and we have dear family friends who show some great animals. And so I'm a fair goer, but I'm popcorn fest all the way.
See, in the interest of full disclosure, I have to actually admit on our podcast that I've actually been to the county fair, but not the popcorn festival, which is clearly a slight against the entire city. So, so if
Well,
in the
I'd
event I
be
ever show back up again, I'm gonna have to make up for that.
I'd be happy to buy you a cold beverage if you can make it to a popcorn festival. So my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law and a couple friends have started one of what I think is the best bar restaurant in downtown Valparaiso. And so I will be stationed at Peddler's Pizza Pub. I'm sure helping to deliver beers and enjoying the popcorn festival this fall. So if you make it, let me know.
All right. All right. Well, Jill, thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate you coming on and answering all our questions. I know we had a bunch of them, but thank you once again.
Well, I'm not sure we were rolling when I said this, but thank you for what you guys do to bring more and more sunshine to the Horizon League. I think it's incredibly important. We talked about the modes of communication, but what you're doing, and Bob and Jim, matters. So thank you, and look forward to getting to know you guys better.
All right. Well, great. Thank you very much.
All right, great to meet you guys.
You too.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a great week, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Indeed,
Sounds
we
good.
will.
Take care.
All right. So that was it. So I don't know what we're going to do next week, or maybe we'll just take some time. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet, um, but yeah, it was a great conversation.
Yeah.
We don't have dude, we don't have bad interviews. We're awesome. Yes, I
We'll
am
take,
dumping ego right now.
Bob, we'll take next week and we'll just digest what Jill had to say and think about,
Yeah.
that, hey, the league's in good hands. She's going to figure out where we need to go, what needs to be done, and help us get there as a league. But I feel pretty confident after, hearing her answer the questions that she definitely has an open mind to any and all solutions to, keep elevating the Horizon League brand. And that's exactly what we need. We've got strength. We've talked about it many times, Bob. On the women's side, you look at the deep runs that Cleveland State and Purdue Fort Wayne had
Yeah.
in the postseason. You see Green Bay, giving Minnesota everything they could in the NCAA tournament. On the men's side, we're right there on
Oh,
the
and they just brought in an Oregon transfer too. Oof.
Yeah,
Yikes.
that tells you a little bit
Talk about
something about
reloading.
the starting point guard for the Oregon Ducks. That's pretty
And
impressive.
an
So
Olympic gold medalist, if I recall correctly. Like,
now you're just making
damn.
me feel like I've accomplished very little in my life. But but with that said, we see how strong the league is, and having Jill here and learning, and coming in with no preconceived ideas. Anything seems to be on the table, and I really appreciate
Yeah.
that about our conversation with her in terms of then her directions on how to elevate the league. So I think we're in good hands, Horizon League fans, and thank you guys for listening, and thanks to Jill for joining us when she's brand new on the job, and probably still learning where the coffee maker is in the office. So
Very true. Very true. So yeah, so we'll digest this next week, and I'm sure we're also going to talk about, because we got the transfer portals windows closed, so everybody who's out is out. Now we get to talk about who's coming in. So until then, horizonroundtable.com, that is where all of our podcasts and articles are at. Go read all of Kyle's stuff. He's done like 5 days worth of articles worth of Bob Dunn stuff for women's basketball. You gotta go read all that stuff. Horizonroundtable.com. Also, we do baseball, because we do baseball too. You can pull us up wherever podcasts are available. You can pull us up on your Amazon or Google devices. So tune in next time. Until then, thank you all for listening.